Welcome to La Mia Italy, a series of short videos about Italy by a Brit with Italian blood who's lived in Britain and Italy and loves them both. This is the story of a British shipwreck in which hundreds of Italians died. It's not that well known in the UK or Italy, but is definitely remembered by the old Italian community in the UK and is something which deserves not to be forgotten. Nationality laws were very different in the 1930s, and Italians who had lived in the UK for several generations may well not have been British citizens. They probably thought this didn't matter. People travelled less in those days and didn't necessarily need passports. Italy had fought on the same side as the British in the First World War, and Mussolini was viewed fairly benignly as a barrier against communism, so there was no obvious reason to worry about passports. This all changed on the 10th of June 1940, when Mussolini declared that Italy would enter the Second World War on the side of Nazi Germany and, at a stroke, turned all the Italians living in the UK into potential enemy aliens. So what did happen to the Anglo-Italian community of around 20,000 people on the outbreak of war? The uncomfortable answer is that the vast majority of Italian males were quickly interned on Churchill's orders. Collar the lot, he is reported to have said, without proper trial, and several thousand were held in camps on the Isle of Man. In June 1940, the British authorities put 734 Italian men interned on the Isle of Man, aged between 16 and 74, onto the ship the Arandora Star to take them to Canada out of harm's way, along with other enemy aliens such as captured German prisoners of war. I don't want to be anti-British about this, I'm sure it was much worse in Nazi Germany, but these Italians were not captured enemy soldiers. They were waiters, chefs, hairdressers, ordinary folk. The ship sailed from Liverpool, bound for Newfoundland. It was overcrowded, with people sleeping in the bathrooms. The Italians were generally in the more cramped lower decks, while the younger German and Austrian prisoners of war were on the upper decks. The Arandora Star wasn't part of a convoy, and it was spotted by a German U-boat. Its commander, Gunther Prien, said he wasn't even sure it was a British ship, but reported that it was zigzagging as if to avoid detection by submarines, so they fired a single torpedo. The ship was hit and sunk within half an hour. It isn't clear exactly what happened, but the Italians were in the lower decks and were generally older and struggled to get on the hopelessly inadequate lifeboats. It was entirely typical that one of the first bodies to be washed up on the shores of Ireland was Ernesto Moruzzi, an elderly fish and chip shop owner from Glamorgan in Wales who was in his 60s. In total, 446 Italians were drowned. There was a government report on the sinking, the fourth worst British merchant shipping disaster of the war, but the Snell report was never published. The truth was that it quickly became apparent that in the rush to collar the lot, many of the Italians on the ship were well-integrated ordinary people rather than known fascists, and they should never have been interned in the first place. They had been in the worst conditions on the boat and been unable to get on the lifeboats, but it was still suggested the high death toll amongst the Italians was the result of cowardice. And that, as far as most of the world was concerned, was that, except for the Italian community in Britain, and in some parts of Italy with a special connection to the people on the Arandora Star. By 1943, the Italian armistice meant Italians were no longer enemy aliens. But the Italians in Britain never forgot, and the memorial on the front of the Italian church in Clerkenwell is one of several around the country to the disaster. And this is also the story of the old Italian community in Britain, of the Little Italy in Clerkenwell and other Italian communities, whether in Scotland, Wales or towns like Bedford, which attracted migrants from Italy to work in the local brick factories. That community has largely been swallowed up by much larger scale migration from Italy within the European Union and diluted. For example, who would think that I was half Italian and have an Italian passport? And in many ways that's the point, that by the time of the Second World War, this community wasn't fully Italian either, and had developed its own character, making it even more tragic that so many of them were condemned as enemy aliens, when, of course, they were nothing of the sort. I hope you found this video interesting. I'll be doing more along similar lines, so please feel free to subscribe. In the meantime, in bocca al lupo, and I'll see you all soon.